we'll be getting going in 5 minutes. So I'm gonna set the timer and we'll put on a song and get settled in, and then we'll get started. So hey everybody. All right, let's get this party started. Thanks for being here, everybody. Just get my windows all set up and we can get this going. So welcome everybody to another episode of Brand Alchemy, where every Wednesday, we do one of these live stream classes and I go over everything that I've learned about branding and business design, specifically for creatives, artists, and solo entrepreneurs. So today's topic is all about action, which is to say, what do we actually do to make our business goals and our creative visions become reality? That's what we're going to be looking at today, and how we can best leverage action to create progress and forward momentum. So Brand Alchemy is composed of a 4-phase process, and that's these 4 phases we've been going through, starting with the first phase, and that's what this whole entire month of January has been focused on. And then next month we'll be moving into the root phase. So today's class is actually the final presentation for this first phase, which is the seed. So here's the full seed. The seed itself is composed of 4 parts, and each week over the last I think it's been about 4 weeks now, we've gone through bit by bit each of these components to the seed strategy. So just to kind of refresh, starting at the top, everything starts with vision, right? So the first, it was episode 2 of Brand Alchemy. It was all about vision and how to develop and create a compelling vision to give us something to work toward. So then we went to essence and we broke that down, which is actually 2 parts, archetypes and attributes. And we went through all of that, going over all the archetypes and the brand attributes and how those attributes can be woven into a brand statement. So that was episode 3, and you can watch the recordings if you missed any of those. So then next up, audience. And this is what we focused on last week. And what we did was we figured out our audience map. So who are the people surrounding our work, right? Who's our audience? Who are our co-creators? And we filled out this map. And then for each one of these audience members, we create a profile. And this is the template, and this is one of the profiles. So again, if you want to learn about that, go back to episode 4. So today, our focus is on action, which is the tactical, tangible steps that we can take to move all this forward. So the thing about action is that there's a relationship between vision and action. They work together. So vision is ultimately where we're headed or what we're looking to accomplish, and action is the steps that we can take to get there. So starting with vision gives us a compass. It lets us know what direction is the right direction, or it's ultimately giving us something to work toward. Without vision, it's really easy to just run around in circles and not get anywhere, not really actually make traction or progress. So once we've got vision and we know where we're going, then we need to take action. And that's where the creation of the craft or the art, whatever it is that you do and create, this is where you actually get into that creative mode. Oftentimes we find that we either have vision and no action, or we have action with no vision. So having those two together, vision plus creative action, is what gives us results. That's what gives us the fruits of our labor. Now the key thing here is that the process itself of going, taking the vision, putting it to action, and getting the result isn't actually the ultimate aim. You know, the journey is the destination, so to speak, but also is the fruit. We'll be getting more into that here momentarily. So when it comes to this topic of taking action, of like getting into do mode, right? It can often feel like strenuous, like something like just this idea of like work is work, it's hard work, it's going to be a challenge, right? And I feel like to a certain extent we all carry this idea with us that, you know, creating something of value is going to be really, really hard work, and it often is. And I think that to a certain point it can't really be avoided, but I do believe, and I have experienced, that there is a way to turn this strenuous sort of approach to work and turn it more into play. And I feel like the difference between those two, between hard work and joyful play, is simply just a state of mind. It's just how we approach the work and you know, what we're bringing to it, so to speak. But there is a way to achieve what George Cao calls joyful productivity. So being in a state of relaxed flow and relaxed productivity, having things get done, moving things forward without being this guy and being super stressed out, or just, yeah. Not to say that's bad, because there are moments when this sort of energy is required. But this play can be our default state. And again, it's really a matter of finding center amidst the process and being relaxed and engaged as we're creating. When we're relaxed and engaged when we create, then that's what allows us to access the flow state. And the flow state, I'm sure that you've experienced it. If you haven't, then I'll explain at least my interpretation of it, my experience of the flow state. It's basically when we're working on something, and it's usually some sort of creative endeavor. It doesn't have to be, but it's just we're doing something that is basically it's like when you're creating something and you get so into it that you almost like lose yourself to it. You lose track of time. You're not even the one doing the thing anymore. It's just happening, right? The words are just flowing out. And that's where I love living in flow state. And that's, you know, something that I really strive to be the baseline. So when we're in flow, things are just smooth sailing, right? And there is a way to engineer flow, to create more flow. Thus making it easier to get places, right? I mean, a sailboat's not really expending much energy, even though it's going somewhere, right? Because it's in flow. It's working with the sort of tailwinds, so to speak. So flow is awesome, right? But it can be quite a rare thing. And there's a problem, is that, you know, flow state has an enemy. It has a dark side, and that's, you know, what's gonna stop flow is the question. And the answer to that question is resistance, and not the good kind of resistance, the bad kind. It's the kind of resistance that takes that fluid, productive flow state and stops it right where it is. Oftentimes resistance actually stops us before we even start. So we never even had a chance to get to flow state because we stopped before we even started. We talked quite a bit about resistance in a previous episode, so we won't go in depth there. But essentially, when we give in to resistance, what we're doing is really giving into distraction. And this is a really key concept to key word, really. This is something I heard just very recently, and it was quite an aha for me. So when it comes to distraction, I mean, we all know like generally what distraction is, right? It's like when we're focusing on something that we shouldn't be focused on, right? It's like it's something that's not conducive to whatever it is we're trying to get done. Therefore, it's a distraction. So here's a trick question, kind of a trick question. It has an unexpected answer, but the question is, what is the opposite of distraction? And go ahead and even type in the comments what you think the answer to this question is. So most people, myself included, when I first was asked this question, resort to the opposite of distraction must be focus, right? But the thing is that it's actually not focus. And the answer to the question of what the opposite of distraction is hidden in plain sight within the word itself, distraction. So the prefix of the word is dis, right? So when you dis something, you're kind of, it's like the antithesis of it, right? So if I dislike something, I don't like it, right? So if I'm experiencing distraction, what does that mean? It means I'm experiencing distraction, right? A lack of traction. So the opposite of distraction is traction. Interesting, right? And you can see this really clearly because when we're trying to get traction in a situation that's just not suitable for it, then we get distraction, right? We get nowhere fast, really. So we can spin the wheels all we want, but it's not going to go anywhere. And that's distraction. So when we're engaged in something that's a distraction, we're going nowhere fast. Or even perhaps we're going somewhere that isn't the where that we want to go, right? So the key here is that we need to have a balance of vision and action, right? And that's why these are two core pieces of this whole the seed strategy. So here, there's a key here is that there's a goal, an aim, a vision, a dream, an intent, right? That's the target. The action is the act of aiming for it, having the bow and arrow, so to speak, pulling the arrow back and then releasing the arrow, and all of that process going towards the desired result. That's the action. So when we have those two together, when we have a direction and we have action to back it, right? So we have a vision and action to go towards it, then that's what creates progress. So really what we're doing is we're looking to close the gap between our reality and our dream. And when we take action that's directly associated and linked to and tied to our dream, so when we take action and we know why we're doing it and we can see that it's a step in the right direction, that closes the gap a little bit, right? So it's constantly doing that. And then when we take an action that's a distraction, and even the word action is in distraction and traction as well, which is also quite interesting. So when we're distracted and take distracting actions, we widen the gap. It usually doesn't stay where it's at. It's either getting, with everything that we do, we're either widening the gap or narrowing it. So, all right, so how do we do it? Right? What's the, when it comes down to it, like, what are the action steps, right? Well, one of the classic creative process looks something like this, right? We have this starting point, which is like here, we have the reality on the left and the dream on the right. Same thing with the creative process. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this diagram before. But yeah, we start on the left, and then there's this spaghetti craziness of chaos that happens, and and then at the end is the end, and oftentimes it can really feel like that, and oftentimes too for a lot of artists and creators, it can be really, we have very unpredictable creative processes. So sometimes the fire burns brightly, right? Sometimes the inspiration is there, we're in flow, we're getting things done, we're making progress, and it's almost to the point where we can't stop. It's just like blazing, right? But then what happens is that when we're not in control of our fire like that, and we let it kind of go out of control, then the exact opposite of that also is kind of destined to happen, which is burnout. And that's not a fun, definitely not a fun place to be. But it's something that can be avoided. And the way that we avoid burnout is simply by learning to become masters of our own fire, creative fire, inner fire, you know. Fire, when I say fire here, I'm really talking about passion and like what motivates us, right? It's like, it's your fire that gets you out of bed and, you know, to the computer to work, whatever it is that you're doing. So mastery of our fire is key. So how do we do that? Well, one place to start is we can turn this spaghetti clusterfuck of a creative process into something that is harmonic and based on sort of natural laws and organizational principles. Because as nature has to teach us, order is beauty. I mean, there's a relationship between order and beauty. And even though there's a sort of an essence of chaos here, because nothing really repeats itself, there's also a more fundamental orderliness and beauty to it. And so one way to create beautiful things is to create them in a beautiful, orderly way, right? So how do we do that? Well, through systems, right? It's about having structures and systems in place, mechanisms in place for a creative process where there's a sort of there's a method to the madness, right? There's this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens, right? It's creating an order, a sequence of, you know, a logical forward movement, so to speak, rather than just having something like that where it's just all over the place. So having systems and processes is super key. There's a lot of ways to do that. We'll talk about a few really simple ones, but I just want to mention this here right now. So the other really key element is structure, right? Which is very, very, it's related to systems, because the systems and the processes are really about process. It's about what's kind of happening and moving and churning and all the moving parts, whereas the structure is the sort of foundational framework or structure surrounding it all. So we can create structure around our creativity. And the irony is that a lot of times artists and creators kind of avoid this idea of structure and systems and control because it feels like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, squash my creativity. There's gonna be no freedom, blah 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 blah. But the truth is that a chaotic creative process is actually more limiting than something that's very kind of boxed in and you know, it kind of has a A B C D E F G sort of a sequence. So I guess the flip here, the catch, is that by creating structure and limitation around the creative process, we actually liberate our creativity, and that's what enables us to find true freedom, rather than just kind of like the perceived freedom of just, you know, not having any method to what we do, right? So this is a really key thing. Tekla says, now that's alchemy. Thank you, Tekla. Thanks for being here. And I agree with you. And Tekla says, just learning to embrace the idea that structure is freedom. Yep. Wise words right there. It's one of those things that we tend to resist, and when we finally give into it, we're just like, oh my goodness, why did it take so long for me to just finally get into this? So, okay. Now, even though this is a heart, and it normally is going to make us think of love, what this actually represents here is respect. Now, something that I've learned for myself is that in my history and experience as an artist and a creator and entrepreneur, I have been terrible about respecting myself and my time. Like, I respect my clients, I respect my audience, I respect people around me to varying degrees, but for some reason I would not respect my own process, my own time, and what I mean by that is if I schedule in for Thursday at 3 p.m. that I'm having a meeting with a client to do some work, I'm going to show up to that meeting, right? The chances of me not showing up are extremely slim to none. Now, if I do the same thing, which is putting a time in a calendar to do a thing, which is super basic and, easy. If I do that for myself to work on something that's mine, where I don't have a client that's going to be waiting for, my patterning would be to just not show up for that thing and find excuses to just not do it, right? And kind of buying into my own belief that that was freedom somehow or something like that. But really, I was just not respecting my own process, my own time, my own creativity, and it was suffering because of that. So through this process of me going through this transformation and launching my personal brand, and at the beginning of the year, I set some systems in place, and I've begun to respect myself and my time and my family's time and my wife's time, and just really bringing this idea of respect into the equation has been absolutely changing everything for me. And I'm starting to see that my chains were really due to this, not that. And creating more order and structure has liberated me, which is great. And I hope it will do the same for you. So talk about respect. So again, on this idea of respect, it's we think about getting a job. When we get a job, we show up to the job. We wake up and, say we have a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. And that's just what we do, right? We go, we show up at the right time, we work, and then we leave, and, we get paid. And it's if we don't show up one day, we'll get fired, right? There's these consequences. And, due to the mixture of things, we tend to have a really high respect for our job, right? Even if it's something that does absolutely nothing for our personal development or soul, it could just be some conveyor belt job or something. But it's strange that we would respect that situation more than something that's going to be actually deeply beneficial, like making your dreams come true and doing the thing you've been thinking about for so long, right? So the key here is I've been feeling into this idea of being my own best employee and employer at the same time, because that's what you are when you're an artist or entrepreneur. Generally, it's just me, myself, and I, and that creates a situation where if we don't have discipline and self-respect and systems and all these things in place, then it's easy to just be our own worst possible employee, the person that never shows up, never says what they're going to do, don't think for themselves, don't really have anything of value to offer. They just, it's this weird thing. So it's the key is that we need to show up to ourselves in the same way that we would show up to a boss, right? Because, what's the difference? I mean, what's the alternative? If we don't show up to ourselves, then we just need to get a job, right? So it's be your own best boss, or be your own best employee, or be someone else's. It's kind of what it comes down to for me. And I chose me. So it really comes down to self-mastery. Freedom is self-mastery, and self-mastery creates freedom. If we're not in control of ourselves, we're not free, period. And there's many layers that we tend to not be in control of ourselves. But just one really glaring example is just not having the ability to sit down and get work done when we say we're going to do it, right? That's, it's like having a desire and then just not going after it. That's, to me, a expression of a lack of self-mastery, right? Because we're not in control. We're giving into distractions and, sort of momentary desires and things like that promise immediate gratification or relief, perhaps, at the cost of, not being in control of yourself, which not a good thing. So self-mastery is super important. And another really key element here is time. And this falls into the mastery category as well. And this is something that I've been really healing my relationship to time, because again, this whole concept and idea about lack of self-respect is that I wasn't respecting my time. I wasn't even respecting really time in general. All my moments of life and everything was kind of bleeding into each other, so to speak. There wasn't clear beginnings and endings to certain things in my day, right? So really understanding that, like, time is, besides our attention, time is our most valuable asset, right? We don't get any more. It's like it's always constantly running out, right? So what we choose to do with every moment is so critical. And I can't tell you how much time I wasted by trying to make this work, trying to, get things done without having any process or method or real, deep commitment, right? So, yeah, we need to really get better with our time. So speaking of time, this idea of urgency, right? A lot of times things can feel really urgent, right? And there's other things that are important. There's a distinction between urgency and importance. And a lot of times urgency ends up winning, right? We get an email, somebody's upset about something or whatever, and even if we were working on something at that moment, it's like all of a sudden this urgent thing comes in that needs attention. Now here's the thing: urgent does not mean important. It's different, right? So just because something is urgent and kind of like vying for your attention doesn't mean it's actually worth giving attention. So I love this little graph here of like when we're choosing to do something or planning, it's like asking ourselves, is this urgent or important or both, right? So this little graph shows basically if something is urgent and important, it's first priority, right? If something's important but not urgent, that's second priority. So that's an interesting thing, is it's saying if you have two tasks and you've defined one of them as being urgent and one of them as being important, then the one that's going to win is important, right? Because it's urgency is a very it doesn't I guess it just doesn't need to be important to be urgent. And so it's good to be clear with ourselves on that level. So third order of priority is if something is urgent but not important, then we do it, right? And if something's not important or urgent, then that comes last. And in many cases, it just means don't do it, right? So when it comes to priorities, which is to say, like, what do we focus on? Like, at any given point, there's a million things that we could be doing, right? So the question here is like, well, what exactly do we focus on and when, and how do we figure out figure that out, right? And I'm going to show you a exercise that I use to figure out what to work on, to figure out what is important. Because that's what we want to figure out. We want to figure out what's important, what's urgent, and then prioritize accordingly. So when it comes to priorities, there's 4 categories of priority that are really, really important to focus on. And these are the 4 categories that I focus on when I do brand strategy with clients, and that I'm going to show you how to do here in just a minute. We're going to do a little exercise together. So the number one thing that we figure out regarding priorities is priorities that are related to cash flow, right? Because if we're running a business, running a brand, just trying to exist really in life, like, you know, we need cash flow, and money is a beautiful thing when it's used properly, and when our relationship with it is a healthy relationship. So cash flow is first thing, because without cash flow, we can't really do much, especially in business, right? It's like that's kind of the lifeblood of business, so to speak. So the second thing that we look at is what actions can we take that are going to generate awareness and generate audience, to build audience, right? Very important. The third thing we look at is actions that we can take and priorities relating to creating more efficiency for our process, creating systems, structures, different ways of creating efficiency is what we look at there. And then lastly is inspiration, right? What sort of actions do we need to take just to stay happy and inspired and sane and healthy? So in summary, we need to focus on cash flow, awareness, efficiency, and I put soul here. So yeah, instead of inspiration, we'll go with soul, just because I like that better. Okay, so there's this exercise that we do to figure out what the priorities are, the big picture priorities. And here's what it looks like. So it's pretty simple. Basically, what we do is we're gonna, what I usually do is just set a timer, maybe 10 minutes. It's all that's needed for each of these, and just make a list of projects or actions or things that you feel like could generate cash flow, for whatever the context is for you. And then once we get a few ideas down, we don't really need more than 10. Then we go through and we grade each idea based on the term. So that's in terms of like, when should this happen? Should it happen in the short term, the medium term, or the long term? And then we rate it on a 1 through 10 of like how much, from 1 through 10, how much impact will this action have on, in this case, cash flow? How much, and on a 1 through 10, how much do I actually want to do this thing, right? Desire. And then the total is those two numbers together. So we have one of these for each of the categories of priorities. So we've got cash flow, awareness, efficiency, and soul. So let's just do it. I'll do a quick little run through of this on myself, just so you can see what it's like and experience how it is to fill this out, and you'll see how easy it is. So let's just start here. So regarding cash flow, so what I'm thinking about right now is, what do I need to do in order to generate cash flow? So right off the bat, I need to. So I have a big client project right now that's just been taking a lot longer to progress than I anticipated. So I'm really close to one of the main milestones where I finished the identity system and branding materials for this company. And when I finish that, I get paid, and then the next phase. So I'm gonna say finish open excellence ID system, and then finish open excellent website. Okay, those are two really, really big things. What else can I do for cash flow? So I need to create a sales page for the collab, for the Brand Alchemy collab, which is a private mastermind and membership, where we actually work on all of this stuff in a group setting. So need to create a sales page so I can sell that more effectively. What else can I do for cash flow? What would generate some revenue? I need to create open excellence case study to show what I did with that process so I can get more clients like it. I would say I need to update my capabilities deck. So capabilities deck, like in the freelancing and agency world, it's basically just a PDF deck that kind of gives potential clients the big picture of like what I do and who it's for, and you know, case studies and all that kind of stuff. That's a very important selling tool. So another thing for cash flow, I need to well, that's good for now anyways. Those are some really immediate things. Okay, so we'll just go through. And so ID system, that's short term, so we'll just put an S. Impact on cash flow, that's a 10 for sure. How much do I want to finish that? 10. So then that gets 20. The website, it's like a medium term. It's gonna take probably a month or two. So in terms of, when we're talking about the terms, think about short term in the sense of like days or even up to weeks, and then medium term for me is like weeks to months, and then long term is kind of like months getting into a year or even more. So finished webs, that's again a 10, a 10, and so that's 20. Create sales page for collab term. That needs to be short because I'm gonna be we're opening up registrations soon, which I'll mention at the end here. Impact. I really don't know. It's still early days, so I'm gonna give it an 8. Desire, I definitely want to do that, so that's 18. Create open excellence case study. That's gonna need to be like a medium thing. I think the impact is gonna be high because it's gonna be a really good case study. Desire, I'm just gonna put 9. I don't know why I'm feeling like this is something about it I don't want to, but that's okay. It's important to just be honest. Update my capabilities deck. I'm gonna have to say that's also a medium. I'm gonna give that an 8. And desire is also an 8. Okay, so normally I would keep going here and probably fill out this whole thing. But now what we want to do is, once you've got it all down, then we can start to prioritize, right? Because now we've got we want to look at the term and the totals. So these two 20s are most important thing. One of them's short term, one of them's medium term. So it's super obvious that this right here is like, this is the number one thing I need to be focused on, right? When it comes to generating cash flow. This is also important, and that comes next, right? And then what we have a 19. So here's, I want to point this out. This is an interesting thing. So we have these two. So this 19 would usually come first, right? But we have this 18, which is a lower number, but the term is short term. So we have to kind of like figure out, all right, out of these two, let's see which one is more important. I would say, well, I think they're both important, so I'm just gonna go with that. this is a secondary. So basically what we're looking for is like the top 3 things, or 4 if needed. 3 is a really good number though. All right, so these are my main priorities for cash flow, and if I was to be even more ruthless, then I could just say really it's just these 2. That's what I really need to be focused on for cash flow. So that's great. All right, awareness, right? So what do I need to do now to generate awareness, to build my audience, right? So awareness is to create, I would say, start partnership reach out. So what I mean by that is I need to start reaching out to other people that have audiences that I feel like I could serve their audience and there's a match, and start reaching out and figuring out ways to work together in some way. And that can bring awareness to what I'm doing. Because right now, the way I've been doing this is just producing content and just kind of like finding my flow with it, finding my voice with it. And I haven't really been doing any reach out yet, but that's what I need to be doing next to start building awareness. So partnership reach out. So I could create a PDF download type of a Brand Alchemy cheat sheet type of a thing. And that can tie into the partnership reach out. Okay, so what else could I do to generate awareness for myself? So I also want to point out too that it's really, really useful and helpful to do this with a friend or partner, coworker, or something. Doing it with someone else can really help to give you perspective and see things that you wouldn't normally see. Generally when I do this with a client, it just flows so fast, and then me trying to do it by myself, it's a little bit slower. All right, so create a PDF download. I also need to I need to launch my website. And I would also say I could do interviews. All right, let's just do with that for now, and we'll just figure out the top one. So partnership reach out. I would say that can start now. I feel hesitant to start now because I feel a little hesitant, but I feel like it's a really smart move. So impact, that's going to be a 10 for sure. Getting partnership situations. I want to say desire. That's like a 6 right now for me, just because I don't know. I was saying how I'm kind of feeling this resistance to it. I'm just going to do desire as for a 6. You know what? I'm actually going to change this to ease. Sometimes I do that. I'm going to say that's more of an 8 then, because in this case, what we're looking for is not necessarily what I want to do, but what's just going to be easy for me to accomplish. So that's an 8. So we'll give that 18. Create a PDF download. Basically some sort of an opt-in thing that could be distributed. Just to help spread the word about what I'm doing. It doesn't even need to be a download. It could just be a slide deck or some sort of a short ebook or something. So I'm going to say that's a medium thing, medium term. Impact, I don't really know. I'm just going to give it a 6. So one thing I've been playing with lately when it comes to rating things from 1 to 10 is to not use 7s. This is a really cool trick that I learned. The reason being is that 7 is a safe number. It's kind of like it's non-committal, right? It's like, yeah, it's kind of nice, but not that great. But it's like I'm not gonna say I want it or don't want it. It's kind of in the middle. So when we remove 7 from the possibilities and go from 6 to 8, 8's a yes and 6 is kind of a no, right? Or at least 6 is more clear no than 7. 7's a maybe. We want to avoid maybe. All right, so PDF download ease. That's actually really easy for me. Oops. So launch my website. I'm gonna do medium on that one too. Impact, I think it's gonna be pretty impactful, and it's also gonna be pretty easy for me. I just need to find the time, so we'll do that 20. And then getting interviews like podcasts, things like that, I'm gonna do medium. Impact I think is gonna be a 10, and the ease, we'll give that a 8. Okay, so we have this 20 and a short 18. I'm just gonna stick with those two. All right, and then so for efficiency, so now the question is like, what actions can be taken to create more efficiency in my workflow, in my life? So one thing that needs to be done is I need to like revisit and refine my production schedule. Just need to optimize that and fine tune some things just so I can keep things running on track. Because I'm finding sometimes it can be a little challenging to like stay up with my schedule when things slip a little bit. So I just need to kind of create a little bit more space. Another efficiency, I'm gonna put my website here, launch website. And the reason I'm thinking this is because the way I'm like blogging right now on like Medium and Facebook and all these platforms, and right now there's not like one place for me to like collect and put everything so that it's easy to digest, it's easy to share. It's like I see my website as being a tool of efficiency for consuming my content, right? So it's kind of actually efficiency for you and for me, because when I get my website launched, that's going to be home base. I'm going to publish and write everything there first, and then it'll be disseminated throughout Facebook, throughout all the social media. Efficiency. I need to just like let's see. What could I do to be more efficient? Well, I don't want to bore you with having to think about this anymore, so we'll just roll with these two, because I just want you to get a feel of like what this process is like so that you can get to work with it. Okay, so refine my production schedule. That's a short-term thing. I think the impact is going to be, it'll be like an 8. Desire, I don't really want to, but I gotta do it. We'll do ease. I think that's right. So if we use impact and ease together, impact is basically saying how much of an impact is this action going to have on efficiency or whatever the topic is. And then on the flip side is how much effort, or in this case, how much ease. So what we're looking for is something that has high impact and low effort, right? Okay, so then launching my website, again, it's going to have to be a medium thing, but the impact for efficiency is going to be 10. And how easy is it? It's going to be easy for me to do. I just have to do it. Boom. Okay. So oh, and this one it's not a 6 anymore. It's more like a 10. I mean, how hard is it to just look at my schedule, right? So these are both be getting highlighted as must-do items. So, okay, last one, soul. Oh, Tekla says, this is so powerful, thanks. Thank you, Tekla. I'm really glad this is useful for you. Okay, so the last one, soul, right? Inspiration, like, this is like stuff that doesn't make sense on the business bottom line, but that feeds into everything that you do and gives you the energy to do it, right? So this is kind of like what's going to actually keep you inspired. And this is kind of like stuff that doesn't really make logical business sense, but that's just important anyways. This could be spirituality, meditation, yada yada yada. So I'm just going to put that for now as like start meditation practice. Something I've been like skirting around for a long time, and it's just fucking time to get started with it. Start meditation practice. I also need to like formalize my spiritual like practices, which kind of goes beyond meditate, but just kind of like all of the things that I do for my spiritual growth. Like I need to give it a place, and I don't have that right now. It's kind of just whenever I can get to it, right? So I also need to I need to create and release a song. So I have not yet in all my decades of experience as a musician and a DJ, I haven't publicly released a song yet. So I feel like that's something I really need to do. I want to do that just to move my musical endeavors forward. Another thing that I need for soul is like, let's say I'm just gonna say exercise routine I also need. All right, we'll just go with that for now. So term, when am I gonna start meditating now? When am I gonna formalize my spiritual practices? We'll do that in short term too. That'll tie into revisiting the schedule. It's more just like my schedule as a whole, right? Which we'll look at here in just a moment. So here we go. Start meditation. So the impact, how much is that gonna have an impact on my soul? It's like a 10. Ease. So in this case, I'm gonna do desire because I feel like it's more relevant to the topic here. There's like a part of me that's super resistant to this, but like in my deepest self, it's a 10. Formalize let's say create space for practice. Impact, obviously it's gonna be a 10. Desire, that's a 10. Create and release a song, that's gonna be like, that's medium term. Impact on, I think it's gonna be a very good thing for me to do, and I also really want to do it. And then exercise routine term, that needs to be, so I have like really bad circulation and I need to exercise to help with that. because I'll just like I'll sit at my computer and I'll just like at the end of a session be freezing. So I need to exercise more. So the impact, that's going to be, I think it's going to be a 10. And I'm just going to put an 8 because it's still super important. So the two that are the most important are these, because they're both short term and they're both 20s. I'm also gonna highlight this one too, because that's also, I feel like, really important. Okay, so there it is, right? So I've basically figured out that the things that I really need to be focused on next to move all of what I'm doing forward is I need to finish the Open Excellence project, both the ID system and the website. That's gonna bring me immediate cash flow. It's guaranteed, it's already contracted, right? And then to grow my audience, I need to start doing partnership reach out. And also I need to launch my website. And then for efficiency, the two things that are going to create the most efficiency for me in the short term, or just in the near future, is to revisit and refine my schedule based on this. It's been about 3 or 4 weeks now of being on this schedule, which I'll show you. I'm going to show you the schedule in a second. We'll talk about that more. And then there's a website again, right? So website showed up twice, and in both cases, it's got a 20s and I think medium term. So it's kind of saying like, this is important. Just, don't worry about it for the next week or two, right? Because there's these other immediate things that need attention, like first and foremost, this, right? And then to create space for meditation and my spiritual practices and exercise, right? It's basically just personal care is really what this whole thing is about. Personal care and personal development, really. Great. So that's it. That's the primary exercise, like the way that I figure out priorities and the way that I help my clients figure out their business priorities. And I just want to point out too, like, this framework is the same framework I use whether it's working with an individual, entrepreneur, artist, or a corporation or a huge organization. It works no matter what. Okay, so schedule. So we talked about, that was actually mentioned here with revisit and refine the schedule. So here's my schedule. Now, I did it like this because I wanted to kind of grid out my time, and really the way that I did this schedule was I started out by figuring out like, what are the musts of my day, right? And I kind of was thinking like, well, I need to have family time and I need to eat, right? So from that place, I figured out, okay, family goes to sleep, my wife and my baby boy go to sleep pretty early, around 6, 7 at the latest. So that means I get evenings, right? So I knew that. So it's like, all right, well, if they go to bed at 6, then that means we need to have dinner and family time from 4 to 6. Okay. And then we wake up around 7, and then we have breakfast and family time from 7 to 10 a.m. And then we need to have lunch as well for about an hour. So then basically what I did is I just kind of figured out like, what are these time blocks for my days, right? So I basically figured out that for work, I have from, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon is a time block, a little chunk. And then family time and lunch from 12 to 1. And then from 1 to 4 is the afternoon session of work, and then the family time again. And then from 6 to 9 is the evening session. So I basically have a morning session, a afternoon session, evening session, and they're all, 2 to 3 hours. They're really manageable. So once I figured out those basic time blocks, then I went through and then assigned, all right, what does each block get? And the way that I kind of did it, or at least where I'm at right now, is that every morning from 10 to 12, that's my writing and blogging time. So every day, Monday through Friday, I'm publishing a blog post, right? So it's the publishing of the post is kind of the most important thing, because that's what's kind of like keeping me to the schedule, right? It's like the publishing is so important because that's where the accountability lies. If I wasn't publicly publishing and making that a thing, like, it'd be really easy for me to just not show up and just to kind of forget about the schedule. But so anyways, 10 to 12 every morning is writing and blogging, and at the end of that session I publish. So, the way things have gone, sometimes I'll be behind, so then that morning session I have to devote to something else, and then the blogging gets pushed off, and then that evening I have to create the blog post, and that's like the deadline. It's like no matter what, but before I go to sleep, that post has to be published, right? So the afternoon sessions, so basically, in essence, the morning session is just writing and blogging always for me. And then the evening session is basically free flow. It's kind of like whatever needs to happen or whatever I feel like doing more or less is kind of where I'm at with it right now. And then the afternoon session is like where I do kind of the real heavy lifting, so to speak. Which is based around, every Wednesday afternoon we have this live stream. So that takes my whole afternoon session. That's what the session is for. One thing, right? Tuesdays is the collab mastermind group. That's what that's for. Done. Fridays I do my live DJ set. That's what that's for, right? So then I was left with these 2 sessions, Thursday and Monday. I have client projects. I need a space for them. That's what those are for, right? Done. There's my time grid. And I've given a place for everything that I feel like is important. Now, I need to revisit this and kind of like do some tweaks, because there's certain things that are slipping through the cracks. Like, there's nowhere in here does it say meditation, right? Nowhere in here does it say, do your spiritual practice or exercise. So I feel like what I'm finding is that the things I'm scheduling in are getting done, which is amazing. Man, this is like, I used to avoid this stuff at all costs. And now I'm like falling in love with it. So it's about creating, it's like, if we want something to get done, we need to like create the space for it to get done, and then to honor the space that we create for it, right? It's quite simple. So anyways, what this does is that when we have a grid like this, and really this grid, like I said, was really based on and was birthed out of my commitment for 2020 of Monday through Friday daily blog posts, and then a weekly Brand Alchemy class, a weekly DJ mix, and a weekly mastermind, and then just fitting in other things around those things. But those are like the big, the must do on a weekly basis sort of cycles. And then I just kind of created around that, so to speak. And so now, when I wake up every single day, like I know what I'm doing, and that's a very empowering thing. And every time I, get to the end of one of these blocks, I don't, it's like I'm getting things done, which is so amazing. And I feel like speaks to the importance of committing to publishing more so than creating. Because if you commit to publishing, by default you're committing to creating, because you can't publish unless you create. But if we just commit to the creative process, it's easy to just spend tons of energy on creating and be creating lots of things, but like maybe we're not finishing things because it's open-ended, right? But when we have when we set deadlines of like, nope, this thing's gonna be published, it's just due at this point. It's like there's this, I heard this term that creativity expands, contracts with the time that you give it, which is to say, if you give something 3 hours, if you say this is going to take 3 hours or a week or whatever, it'll take that long. If you say I'm going to do this in an hour, then it'll also take that long, right? It's kind of like, it's just takes as long as we take. So Tekla says, do you pre-plan your blog content or is it free flow writing? Okay, so this is a really good question. So I thrive in flow, right? I am as a musician, I am a multi-instrumentalist, and I improvise. Like, I don't know songs. I don't sit down and play songs. I just make them up. I make up music. It's all kind of just in the moment. And same thing with my DJing is like, I'll do prep, but when I DJ a set, like, it's all just in the moment, right? Now for the writing and blogging, it's basically I sit down and I may or may not have an idea of what I'm going to write about. But I'm basically just sitting down and just flowing with what comes out, and 95, maybe even 98% of what comes out first is what gets published, right? And, that's taken me years of I've been doing copywriting and creative writing for a very long time. And, I'm at that point now where I'm able to access the flow state with it. Flow state requires that you have competency in what you're doing, right? It's like there's this balance of that it's slightly challenging, but it's also you're good enough at it that you have like an ability to access the flow. If you don't know how to ride a bike, you're not good at it yet, you're not gonna it's gonna be really wobbly and awkward, but once you are good at it and you like get up to an edge, that's when you enter that flow state. So with the writing and blogging, it's all just in the moment. Again, I'll be thinking about it kind of constantly. I'm always kind of thinking about what to write about and things like that, but it doesn't really take any sort of form until I sit down and write it. And, sometimes a post comes out in minutes and sometimes it takes hours. And again, it kind of just takes as long as I let it take. So with the classes here, for instance, I'll speak to with how I plan for that. Basically, I know the topic of each class, moving forward, like I know that. And then what I do is, at the beginning of the week, I'll just start making the slide deck. So for this, what we're looking at here in this experience, I started preparing for this last night. I put in maybe, I don't know, 2 hours or something last night, and then another 2 or 3 hours this morning to finish it up. So it's taking me on average, about 4 hours or so, maybe 5 hours to prepare for each presentation, and then it's just showing up in the moment, right? But yeah, for me, I'm really seeking more and more flow, and like the ultimate for me is to have what comes out to be the final product. Like that's how it is. That's where I always strive to be, even with music, right? Like, when I play DJ set, like all these Friday DJ sets, like I'm doing it all live, and then it is what it is when it's done, right? If I was to take a different approach, I wouldn't be able to fit it in, because I could easily just take a whole week to do a DJ set if I wanted to, or I could take a week to do any one of these things, right? But by giving it its place and saying, it's like, I know I have to do this class, right? And I only have so much time to prepare for it. I need to be wise about my time. Otherwise, I'll end up in a situation where I have too much prep work and not enough time. But the thing is that even if I'm not fully prepared, it doesn't matter. I still have to show up anyways. And that has been such an important piece of the puzzle for me. Okay, so that's the schedule. This is a very comprehensive kind of full picture schedule that works for me because, I have a family now, and it's like I'm really needing to get a grip on my time because I haven't in pretty much all of my life. Now, for you that are listening, like maybe it's just that maybe the thing is just, I need to do a weekly webinar, or it's like there just needs to be a sort of like a rhythm and a deadline, I think, is the key thing. It doesn't need to be as much as stuff is here, but this is what works for me and what kind of is keeping me excited. So it's this idea of your rhythm, your pulse of like, what is your publishing schedule, right? Like what are you promising your audience? I feel like artists are freaking terrible with being in a sort of consistent pulse of creation, not creation, because artists are always creating, but of publishing, of putting it out. It's really, really common for an artist or a musician to kind of like disappear into the studio for, months at a time, sometimes even years. And then, they come out and here's a new thing and they put it out and then they disappear again, And, a lot of times I see artists complain because they have this idea that like, oh, nobody listens to it, or the Facebook algorithms, ruined everything, or whatever the excuses are. But for me, in my perspective, what I see is that they're just not consistently publishing and connecting with their audience. So when they come out after being gone for a year and say something, and then they're met with like, not as much enthusiasm as they were anticipating, then they get disheartened. But, it's just the way it goes. So it's this consistent, persistent action mixed with intent or vision is what gives us results, progress, right? This grid, this time grid creates a frequency of like, for what I'm doing. Every time I publish a blog post is a pulse. It's like a little, another little wave out into the universe. Every time I do one of these classes, it's a bigger pulse, right? It's kind of like, I see it like this, these smaller waves are, the blog posts, little blip, 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 blip. And then the bigger ones are like each weekly masterclass, these larger pieces of content or whatever. And, all of it together is what creates this frequency or this rhythm. If there's no rhythm, then it's a mess. There's nothing to follow. It's like, for it to be a stable frequency, it has to have a stable pulse, right? It has to have a stable waveform, so to speak. So pattern, something to follow. And that's exactly what doing something like this does. So here's the thing about this whole process is that like, destination gives purpose to journey, right? Your vision of what you want, your desire, your goal is what makes you start the whole thing at all, right? Without that goal in mind, there would be no reason to start it, right? So destination gives purpose to journey. But also, on the flip side, is that the journey is the destination. So there's this really funny paradox, this dichotomy between having a goal in mind and going and working towards something, knowing where we're going, but also like not forgetting to enjoy the process of getting there, because that's all we're really doing is just constantly moving towards, or just moving through life. You know what I mean? Like, we don't ever really arrive anywhere, because once you get to the destination, it's like, cool, take a snapshot, a selfie, take in the view, and then it's like, next. And that's how it is with vision. It's like, it's not like we create a vision and then when we get there we win and then like game over. It's like, no, you just create a new vision, because it wasn't even about that destination in the first place. It's about the journey. But if we don't give the journey a destination, then where are we going, right? So this is really funny paradox, but I think it's really important to remember that it's intertwined. The journey is the destination, and the destination gives rise to the journey, right? So a thing that I think is really important to address here when it comes to the creative process and trying to make a business out of our creativity or out of our passion or whatever it is that we need to set our expectations straight. We need to put our expectations in their rightful place. And it's really, really, really important to only count on what we can actually count on, right? I'm going to say that again. Count on what you can count on. So what does that mean? Like, what can we count? What can't we count on? Well, generally speaking, a lot of people, when they get in the business game, they have this expectation of like, I'm going to make so much money, financial abundance, woo-wee, and it's like all this, money. It's just like, yeah, I'm going to be a millionaire. This is going to be great, Problem is that that's not counting on something we can count on, because there is no guarantee. There's actually a high likelihood that it won't work out. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the nature of business. It's like, I don't know what it's like 9 out of 10 businesses fail or something like that. So it needs to be, we need to be expecting something that's different than money. If we do it right, and we care and we show up and be consistent and be creative and be helpful and build an audience, money will come. But counting on it to be $1 million or whatever it's just asking for failure. It's asking to be disappointed, right? So money is a terrible thing to expect, because we just can't count on it. It's yeah. The other thing is fame or notoriety of just, like becoming somebody that people know. It's like, we can't quantify fame. Even we can quantify followers, but even that's something that can't be counted on, because you have zero control over your fame and your followers, and also your cash flow. I don't mean you have zero control over your cash flow, but just, the actual amounts that come in, it's a mystery. The other thing that we can't control is like, approval of people saying, hey, you're doing a good thing, right? Of like, we all want to be picked. We all want to be told like, hey, keep going, you're doing the thing. But really the only person that can do that is you, right? And I think we just need to pick ourselves, and again, we can't count on approval from the outside world, because even if we're doing something that is the right thing, if we look to the world for approval and we don't get it, then that's just stifling the process. So if we can't count on money, we can't count on fame or notoriety, and we can't count on approval, like what can we count on, right? Like, what should we expect through engaging in a process like this? Well, I know from personal experience that growth, right? Growth is something that I can count on. And I don't mean business growth so much as personal growth, right? And this is something that is unique, or maybe not unique, but is kind of central to the whole Brand Alchemy philosophy and approach to it, is that, we're not just looking to like create business just to like make money and, have an exit strategy and all that. Like, there's a much more personal and intimate thing about, getting in touch with our nature as creative, soulful human beings, and figuring out how to provide value at scale as just being a creative being, and figuring out how to make that work, right? So even if it's a failure, even if it's a failure after a failure after a failure, what you're going to get out of that is you're going to grow. And that's something we can count on. That's something I'm counting on. So when I show up to work, I'm not feeling, ooh, how much money am I going to make from this webinar or whatever it is. It's, I'm going to grow from this. And that's worth it, right? That's worth it. What else am I going to, what else can I count on, right? When it comes to doing this work? Well, you're going to get experience, right? You're going to be in the game. There's really no replacement for that. It's like, if you want to learn how to do business, if you want to learn how to make a successful business, then build businesses, right? And fail a lot. You got to lose and lose and lose until you win. It's like any game. You can't go into any sport or game having never played it, or having minimal experience, expecting to win. It's just silly, right? But you just play again and again and again until you become masterful at it, and then you're able to play on a bigger level. So I know that through doing this work, I'm going to gain experience, right? I'm going to gain skills, right? So even if I fail, it's going to be one step closer towards a win ultimately. And then the other thing, the last, thing that we can count on is wisdom, which is, what happens through growth and through experience. Wisdom is basically applied knowledge, or, it's lived knowledge basically. So that's what you're going to be getting. That's what we're going to be getting through this process. And if we can become, if we can grow and become more experienced and more wise, like, it sounds like a win to me. That sounds like something worth going after, right? And if it brings money as a byproduct, great. If it brings fame as a byproduct, great. If it brings approval as a byproduct, great. But that's not what this is for. This is about growth. This is about becoming a better human. This is about, and that's, in my opinion, what needs to happen for us to end up with the reality that we truly want, right? We need to take responsibility and grow. That's it. So the key with all this is we just need to trust the process, right? We need to create a process, submit to the process, and trust the process. Not only that, but we need to love the process, because when we understand what the process actually does, that it makes us grow, it makes us experience and learn, it makes us wise, that's a good thing. So love the process, and we need to have a process in order to fall in love with it, right? So I found for myself, having a process, having that method to the madness, taking this chaos and turning it into order, right? From chaos to order. And order, that's process, that's systems. So, really ultimately what we're working toward here, what I'm working toward is, we want to create a life for ourselves that we don't need to take a vacation from. This distinguishing factor between work and play, that's old paradigm stuff. That's a product of the sort of industrial age of factory workers and whatnot. But we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a hyper-connected world where everybody has a stage in their pocket. There's no rules, there's no limits, really. And so it's about, merging, I feel like, our passions, our creativity, and our work, so that we don't, I feel like if we're in our right purpose and, found the overlap of like what we want to do and what the world needs, and we do that, we won't ever have to work a day in our life. So the question, it all comes down to, when it comes to taking action, which is the topic of today's class, if not now, when? I know for myself personally, it's so easy to just keep putting things off to tomorrow. And, what happens when we put things off to tomorrow is that tomorrow just keeps extending off into the future. And we end up in situations where years go by. Somehow magically years go by, and the thing that we've been thinking about doing this thing tomorrow or next week or whatever it is the whole time, and then we get to the all of a sudden we realize, wait, what happened? It's been years and I still haven't done the thing, right? So for me personally, me doing this and starting this whole series and committing to my personal brand and all of it was me finally just saying enough is enough. I had enough of my own bullshit and stagnancy and complacency, and it's just time to act. It is time for action. And I'm acting because all the world is a stage. Those words have never been more true. All right, so next steps. If you are following along and you are feeling the call to take action and start making your dreams come true for yourself, then I would recommend you do two things. Number one is to identify, let's fix that. To identify your growth priorities, as we showed you earlier. It doesn't need to take more than 60 minutes to do the whole thing for all of them. And then to create a production schedule. Again, you could do that in an hour. It doesn't even need to take an hour. Remember, things take as long as we let them take. So just set the timer and commit to that timer, and then don't let yourself go past the timer, right? And you'll be amazed at how much you can get done when you actually create time for something and then show up. So again, I'll show you that, just to recap real quick of these two things and how they at least look for me. You can do this with a spreadsheet, a piece of paper, it doesn't matter, right? Just a list, and then you just grade things. So that's that, and then you can create a schedule, a grid, whatever it is. It's mostly, I feel like, really what it comes down to is creating space for creativity, and not only that, but also for product, which is to say, putting things out into the world. However that looks for you is fine. I think the important thing is just to create some sort of schedule that works for you and stick with it, and then adjust as you go. So that's the next steps for action. So once you've got that, and if you've been following along and doing the work, then once you get the action done, by this point you will have completed your whole seed strategy. And if you want to catch up on the last this episode and the last 3, went into each one of these in detail, so you can catch up. And so then this whole thing as itself forms the seed within a larger framework, which I'm calling the growth cycle. So we're at the end of this seed phase now. And next week, we are going to be moving into the root phase, where we're going to transition into identity and messaging and this like aesthetic, what it looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like, what it says, these sort of things, right? That's what we're going to focus on next. And then once we get through that, which is the end result of that, is that we'll have an identity system, which is to say like a logo, typography, aesthetic, all that kind of textures, all that kind of stuff. We'll be talking about how to create that, the messaging. And then when that's done, we move into the phase 3, which is the flower phase, which has to do with platform, which is to say that's where we create a website. That's where we create our products. That's where we create our craft, right? Like the craft itself that the brand is kind of surrounding happens in phase 3. And it's kind of like where you create the thing that the world touches, right? And we apply the root identity to it, if that makes sense. We'll be going really deep into all this, so if it doesn't make perfect sense now, don't worry. And then finally, once that's done, once we have our platform, our product, the thing that we have for the world, right? And a way to put it into the world, then phase 4 is the fruit, the experience, right? That's where we focus on engagement, events, experiences, transformation, right? It's like the experience that people have with your product, or if you're a musician, this is where you make your music and your website and all those things, and then this is where you actually like get on stage and perform, and there's like an actual experience that happens. So next week we're going to be focused on, like I said, we'll start the root phase, and next week's specific focus will be on language. So we're going to be starting to take this strategy and everything that we've learned through it, and then start articulating and creating language around our brand that we can then start to share and create clarity as to like how we talk about what we do, and to talk about it in a way that's compelling and interesting. So that is all for today's lesson. We have a Q&A. If anybody has any questions at all, pop it into the chat and we'll answer. If you are looking to commit to this work in a bigger way, and commit to yourself and to start making some big progress, and you would like support and a community, I recommend that you consider joining the collab. This is a weekly mastermind and community that I've put together of just really awesome, like-minded, powerful, artistic, creative people. And we're all building our brands and businesses together in a super supportive, fun, intimate environment. So it's $100 a month, and the way that it works is the registration's open at the beginning of each month, and then they close throughout the whole month, so that each month that we have a focused group and everybody's committed for the month, and then at the end of the month we can let more people in, or some people want to take a break or leave for a little bit. That's fine too. Now, one thing that's important is that this is by application only, because we just want to make sure that that everybody's on the same page and that everybody's the right match. So if you're interested and you want to learn more about this, just send me an email, and would love to talk with you about it. So that's Andy@opulentcreative.com. And great. So it looks like all the questions that came up, I was able to answer kind of in flow. So unless there's any last minute questions, that's a wrap. Tekla says, huge thanks, Andy. Looking forward to the coming weeks. Thank you, Tekla. Means a lot that you're here and following along and getting value out of it. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for taking the time and lending your attention and learning and growing with the rest of us. So that's all for now. We'll see you next Wednesday, same time, same place. We stream on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitch, kind of all over the place. So whatever works for you, you can find me there. So that's all for today. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm here for you. So yeah, that's all. Thank you. Bye.